G'day guys, how's it going? Now this video was originally supposed to be about generators and generating EU for Greg Tech and so forth, but I quickly realized that I would be rather remiss if I didn't actually explain pretty much everything about the power system that is used in industrial craft. So instead this is going to be a video, sort of a quick overview of everything that can be done with energy and EU and so forth. And this particular video, I've made this little test world with a whole bunch of little sort of rooms that display each and every single different type of basically blocks and wires and so forth, and I'll just go through the whole lot one by one, and I'll divide them into sections so these videos aren't too long. Now basically this is kind of a welcome to industrial craft. Actually, this is the basis of industrial craft. It is a mod that basically generates power and also provides a whole bunch of blocks that use that power instead of using other things. Like for instance, this is an electric furnace. It doesn't use coal, it uses electricity to do its thing. It also does things a little bit quicker as a bonus. There's a whole bunch of machines that use EU. There are a whole bunch of machines that, through one process or another, generate EU. There are blocks that store EU and transmit them. There are wires that carry EU, such as these. And, of course, there is... well, not of course, you probably wouldn't expect this, but there are blocks that transform EU. You're probably wondering, how do you transform EU? Why would you transform EU? There are quite a few questions that would probably be raised by people who don't know much about industrial craft and all of these little, bits of blocks and how it all works and the numbers and so forth. But don't worry, I'm here. I will sort of hold your hand and walk you through it one thing at a time. I will take it slowly and I will try and make it so it's not too hard to understand. So let's first talk about wires, because it's probably the easiest, it's the easiest thing to sort of get your head around in terms of all this power stuff. We'll talk about wires in this video, and then in subsequent videos I will be talking about transformers, I will be talking about generators, and then after that I will be talking about these machines, the storage blocks that store EU, and finally, eventually, I will talk about the blocks that use EU, the reason why you would want EU in the first place. And then after that I'll sort of like maybe yet another video about basically sort of good generator setups, but I won't get into that right now. Let's walk into the next room and we see this. This is something called a tin wire. Actually no, technically it's called an ultra low current cable. It's made with 1, 2, 3 pieces of tin in a line like that, and it has these properties. Less than 5 EU per packet, and it cannot be insulated. And there is a loss of 1 EU every 40 meters. Now there's probably a couple of concepts that I need to explain right here. Firstly, 5 EU per packet, what does that mean? And also a loss of 1 EU every 40 meters. Well, once you get this concept down, it would probably be pretty easy to understand what's going on here. So before I even go into that, let's talk about EU per packet. That's got to do with voltage actually. Now I do remember, let's walk into this room, I do remember reading in, I think it's the Industrial Craft Wiki, a pretty good way of simply explaining what voltage is. It does kind of make sense, and I'll kind of try and use a similar analogy to that to try and explain to you what voltage is and how it's significant. Now firstly, there are 3 types of common voltage. Technically there are 4 types. One is low voltage, which is less than 30 EU per packet. One is medium voltage, which is less than 128 EU per packet. and one is high voltage, which is less than 512 EU per packet. And basically anything over 512 EU per packet is extreme voltage. Actually, that's not correct. All of those should be equal to or less than. But anyways, what does this mean? Okay, now, less than 32 EU per pick. Think of it as, per packet. Think of it as, okay, so let's pretend this is a wire, okay? It's one block by one block and it just goes on for a certain distance, okay? We have power that's trying to get through it. Now, if we take, let's see, let me just get stack cobblestone. Think of it like this, okay? There is a little man, okay? He has anywhere between 1 and 32 EU. This man represents one packet of EU. So each bloke that goes through has, say for example, maybe 17 EU, or he's carrying 28 EU or something like that. And because of that, he has a size that is proportional to how much EU he is carrying. Now, if this bloke is bigger than the tunnel that is provided for him to go through, he will not like that and he will explode. But if he is smaller than the tunnel, then he'll be able to run through it no problems, and so will all of his other mates, all of these other little blokes that, they're all carrying less than or equal to 32 EU each. That's kind of what voltage is like. Voltage is basically the same thing. You have these generators and these storage blocks and so forth that can throw out EU through wires. And wires, depending on what type, can carry up to a certain amount of voltage. Any more, and when EU tries to go through that wire, or also, same rules apply for machines. If too much EU per packet goes into the machine or the wire will just explode. And they will also damage a few blocks immediately around them, which is not good. You don't want that. Especially considering how some of the blocks that you make in Industrial Craft and Greg Tech, they take a while, some of them, to get all of the resources together to make them. So the last thing you want to do is break them through something silly like, I don't know, applying the wrong type of wire. So low voltage, this represents low voltage. Blokes can carry up to 32 EU each and run through there, and each wire can have as many blokes as possible running through there. There could be like 1 million blokes running through there every second, so long as they each only have 32 EU that they are carrying or less, they will be happy to just run through that tunnel and go on to the next destination. Next thing, it's the same sort of concept. Medium voltage. Let's pretend this is a medium voltage wire. Don't worry, I'll get into which ones, what types of wires and so forth can actually carry these things in the, a little bit later on in the video. Let's pretend this wire can carry 128 EU per bloke. Okay, same concept. Okay, everything from 1 to 128 EU can be carried by each bloke, and they can run through here no problems. Let's say I've got 126 EU, I can run back and forth no problems. It's all sweet. But if I was carrying 129 EU or 500 EU or whatever, I'd be too big and I would smash into this and I would explode. It doesn't really... Let's just pretend that the blokes have, like, I don't know, little buttons on their head and they are connected to fuses, and these blokes are also carrying TNT because they're idiots. And they go bang. They explode. It's basically that concept that you can run through for all sorts of wires and machines. Here is a tunnel that represents, it's even bigger, 512 EU per tick, or per packet, sorry, I really should try and use the right terminology here. 512 EU per packet is equivalent to high voltage inside Industrial Craft. So instead of blokes, we're talking about packets of energy. And like I said, you can have 1 million packets of energy running through each wire every second or every tick even if you want, so long as each one of them is not more than 512 EU or high voltage, it can run through the tunnel. It can go through the wire. Same thing for medium voltage, which is 128 EU per packet. Same thing for 32 EU per packet, which is low voltage. And also there's extreme voltage, as I said before, which is basically, I don't know what the upper limit is. It's kind of not really documented well. I think the upper limit, you'd think going through this sort of line of reasoning, if you're decent with maths and, you know, sequences, then you would say, oh, okay, so 2048 would have to be the maximum for extreme voltage. But I've read in places, I haven't tested it properly, but extreme voltage could be unlimited, or it could be 8,192 EU per packet. I don't know. Something for you to play around. You won't have to worry about it for a while anyways when you're playing the game, because it'll take you a long time to be able to get to a point where you've got machines and wires and stuff that actually worry about that sort of ridiculous voltage sizes. But anyways, that is sort of an analogy of voltage. Now remember, that's voltage. Very important, because this particular wire can only handle 5 EU per packet. So it's kind of representing a tunnel even smaller than this 1x1 block. If you've got any machine or block or whatever, let's make it daytime, anything at all trying to shove more than 5 EU per packet into the bloody thing, it'll just explode. The wire itself will explode at the very first point. Okay? That is an important concept that you need to understand. And that goes across all wires. All of them have their own limitations and rules. This particular one, 5 EU per packet or less, can travel through it safely. So very low voltage, just take my word for that. We'll get into that later. And loss of 1 EU per 40 meters. Basically, each one of these that you lay down, when you use 3 tin, you get 9 of them. So 3, 6, 9, 12 tin. Using this recipe, you'll get 36 of those. 36 of these, and each EU packet will actually stay the same from the start to the destination. So I could lay down 36, or in this case, you could even lay down 39 of these in a row, and your EU packets would be the same as when they went in. But if you go 40 or more, then you incur a loss of 1 EU per packet. So basically what I'm trying to say is, okay, let's say there's something here and it's generating 5 EU packets, say 1 every tick, so 20 every second. 20 of these 5 EU packets are being sent from this block into this wire. This wire is 40, or let's say for argument's sake, make it easy, 50 meters long. Okay, I've got 50 meters of this ultra low current cable going. By the time this reaches its destination, all of these 5 EU per packet packets, I should say, each of these packets that are worth 5 EU each will end up coming out the other end as 4 EU packets instead, because we've done a loss. And if this cable were, say, 80 meters long, remember, every 40 meters these packets get adjusted by 1 EU. So if this was 80 meters long and there was a machine at the end, packets of 5 EU would be received as packets of 3 EU, and so forth. There is another important concept to remember, guys. You've got to pay attention to, when it comes to cables, how much EU per packet it can handle and how many of these you can lay down before you start losing EU. Now, for some really, really high voltages, the losses aren't really that bad, to be honest. You don't really worry about them much. But for, cables like this where, the amount of energy you're producing or sending is not much, and you want to be frugal about your energy, it's very important to pay attention to that. Now, moving on finally, I can move through these a lot quicker now because there isn't much in the way of new concepts to understand. This is probably one of the most common cables you will ever use. Also mostly in a lot of recipes. This is called copper cable, and it is made like this. Rubber, 6 of them, and 3 copper. There is an alternative recipe. You can make uninsulated copper cable without the rubber, and when you do that, you can then turn it into normal copper cable like that. And that's a shapeless recipe. You can put those anywhere in a crafting table. There you go. Copper cable. Now, copper cable, I am going to mention right now actually that this, sorry, let's go back here. The ultra low current cable, let's call it tin cable. The tin cable cannot be insulated. There are a couple of other types of cables that cannot be insulated, but there are 3 major types of cables, and this is one of them, that can be insulated with rubber around it. This, when I talk about the cables that can be insulated, I will only talk about the fully insulated versions of these cables, because those are the cables that are used most commonly. Those are the cables that when used in the world. Here, let me show you something. Where is it? Here it is. I can lay this cable down just like the insulated version. Look, and it'll connect to it and so forth. But if this thing had power running through it and the packets had enough EU in them, notice how I'm standing on it now? This has got nothing going through it because there's no machines going, hooked up to it. But let's say instead there was, I don't know, a storage EU storage block, and there was another block that was using EU. EU would be traveling through this wire from that block to that block, and if I stood on it, if there was enough EU per packet going through, I would actually get a shock. I would get hurt. You would lose hearts. So, something to take note of. You can use uninsulated versions of cables, but I recommend you just go straight to the top tier insulated types, and those are the only ones I will talk about when it comes to loss. Those are the differences between insulated and uninsulated cables. The uninsulated cables can shock you and hurt you quite severely. In some cases can kill you pretty much instantly, so just be careful using those. And also they lose EU more often than the fully insulated versions. Don't ask me why, it's just the way it was made. I'm not sure if that's true in real life. In fact, I'm quite sure it's not so true at all. But in the game, that's the way it is, so just use your insulated versions. Now, copper cable, as I said, that's how you make it. It can handle less than or equal to packets of 32 EU. Okay? Can insulate it one time, and you lose 1 EU every 5 meters. Now, with this thing, yes, 5 meters isn't long. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If this width of this room was taken up with this copper cable, you would lose 1 EU for every packet. Now, yes, if you had packets of the maximum size going through 32 EU, then you'd have to have quite a long amount of cable before you start to see some significant amounts of loss on your packets. But if you wanted to be frugal, there are little tricks that you can use to stop yourself from losing that power. One of them is like sort of lining your wire. You can, instead of just using one long piece of wire, you can break it up to sort of the length that it loses EU minus 1. You put a storage block there instead. What it does is it kind of breaks it up and you don't lose EU. So it'd be like 1, 2, 3, 4, and for the 5th in this case, really, Rain? Seriously? 1, 2, 3, 4 cables of copper cable, insulated of course, and for the 5th one, instead you would have an energy storage block that receives it and then transmits it through 4 more, and if you continue that sort of sequence, you would not lose any EU at all through the transmission of cables. That's just a little trick that you can use. Moving on, we have gold cable. This can handle medium voltage. less than or equal to 128 EU per packet can go through here, and of course as many packets as you like every second or every tick. It doesn't matter, so long as each packet is less than 128 EU, you can fire 1 billion EU per second through this thing. No worries at all. You can insulate it twice, has a loss of 1 EU every 2.5 meters, the fully insulated version. Now, this is how you make it. There's one way, which is 2 times insulated gold cable. Kind of similar to the other one, the copper cable, only it uses twice as much rubber. And this, you'd probably be more familiar with this. This is an easy way to remember it. Just make the cable uninsulated, and then see, there's a version that is insulated gold cable, and there is another version 2 times insulated gold cable. Just skip this and skip that, go straight for that, trust me, because in also a lot of recipes that you might be using for transformers and storage blocks and so forth, 2 times insulated gold cable is what you use in those, and I recommend 2 times insulated gold cable is what you use in your world, because 128 EU packets, when traveling through it, if this was uninsulated and you stepped on it, you would get one hell of a shock, even just rubbing up against it. Really highly recommend you just insulate it, because when a cable is fully insulated, you cannot get shocked with it in the world. It's as simple as that. So yeah, you've got that method. So it's kind of like just put a stack of these in there, put 2 stacks, one there of rubber, and that will give you a stack of 2 times insulated gold cable. Not difficult. There's also another way you can sort of like make the weaker version with just 1 insulation, and then you can put it in there later on and buff it up again. Yeah, the recipes, they're quite interchangeable. There's quite a few of them. If you really want a full exhaustive list, then go to the Industrial Craft wiki and look it up. It's very comprehensive. It will tell you pretty much every single little detail if you want. But I've just shown you how to make them. It's how I recommend you make them, because I've played with Industrial Craft quite a lot. So yeah, trust me, I'm giving you some good information here. Loss of 1 EU every 2.5 meters. Now, when you've got packets of EU that are around 128 or, not much less than that, you kind of don't really worry so much about a little bit of loss. Okay, 128 EU per pack, I'm going to run about 12 lengths of cable between one machine and the other, which means I'm going to lose 2.5 times 4 is going to be, 4 EU per pack. So 128 EU packets in, 124 EU packets out. Not much of a loss, and if you're generating that fairly constantly, you know what, you're probably not going to miss the EU. There's like a whole bunch of other maths that you can use to determine whether or not you should do this with cables and run lengths and what type of cable and voltage is best for long distances. It's called efficiency. Again, that's on the wiki. If you're really into getting into those sort of nitty-gritty details, go ahead and do it there. I'm not going to cover it because there's no point. To be honest, it's just a matter of just use common sense. Don't get too held up in the maths. Just keep it simple. This gold cable is better than that copper cable, which is better than that tin cable, okay? 5 EU per packet, 32 EU per packet, 128 EU per packet. This is unofficially ultra low voltage. That's all it can handle. It doesn't actually exist. It's just low voltage, but it's lower than 5 EU. This is low voltage. This is medium voltage. And this is high voltage. This is a rather expensive cable. This is called glass fiber cable. There are a couple of different ways to make it. Unfortunately, every single way requires either a diamond or an industrial diamond, and these things are actually quite old and obsolete and defunct. To be honest, they're only in the game just for people who are still hanging around in their worlds with industrial diamonds, so they don't lose all their industrial diamonds if they update their industrial craft. But I think they can pretty safely get away with not using it anymore. I'm thinking next update, just ditch them, because they've carried them over for a lot of updates. You can't make these anymore. You can also use diamond dust in the recipe. It's very expensive. Essentially 1 diamond, 2 redstone, and 6 glass will give you 4 glass fiber cables. That's not much. Honestly, it really is very little. There are a couple of extra recipes. I'm running Feed the Beast Ultimate Pack, so these definitely exist for those. This is the best one. I recommend this. Get 2 electrum ingots. You can make these by crafting together, I think. It's 1 gold dust and 1 silver dust. Put those together and you get 2 electrum dust. And then you smelt that, you get these electrum ingots, and these are awesome actually for a lot of recipes. Get to learn them, get to know them, guys. Electrum, you replace redstone in a lot of recipes with electrum, and you get much higher yields of stuff. There you go. I've just doubled the output. Glass fiber cable. Go get it. There is a third recipe for those that don't have electrum ingots. If you have normal silver ingots from other mods, then you can make 6 glass fiber cable instead of the 4 that you get with the redstone. That's how it's made. You cannot insulate it because it's glass fiber cable. It's really weird because glass fiber cable in real life is not used to it's not used to transmit electricity. It's used to transmit essentially laser light, which is kind of like a way of transmitting information. But whatever, it's a game. It's not realistic. Glass fiber cable in this case transmits high voltage power. Packets of 512 EU per packet. Cannot insulate, again like the other cables, so long as each packet is less than 512 EU. It can transmit as little or as much power through it as you want. Loss of 1 EU every 40 meters, exactly the same sort of losses as what you saw with this tin cable. So if you want to run really long lengths, tin cable or glass fiber cable is probably your best bet. Moving on, for those who want basically a lot more power traveling through their wires, and I don't know why you would, but if you do, okay then, here you go. Here's something called high voltage cable. Now this isn't so expensive to make. It's kind of like, it's good and it's bad. The good thing is, okay, so it costs 3 iron and you get 12 of those, and you smash one of those together with 3 rubber, you get yourself 4 times insulated HV cable. Now yes, I know, 4 times, what are they talking about? There's 1, 2, 3 bits of rubber there. It should be 3 times insulated HV cable, but whatever. They called it that. I think it's just a little typo that hasn't been fixed over a couple of versions. I'm sure they've got more important things to do, but the mod maker has just left it like that. So let's just call it 4 times insulated HV cable. That stuff is, yeah, when you insulate it, it's actually quite fat. It's pretty easy and obvious to see what it is. The stats. Less than or equal to 2048 EU per packet, but that's not quite confirmed. It could be more, as I said before with the extreme voltage tunnel that didn't exist. Basically, I don't know how much these things can handle. It might be 2048 EU per packet. It might be 8,192. Who knows? Let's just say if you're gonna use something more than high voltage, you got to use this stuff. Okay? Can insulate up to 3 times, says 4 times, I've explained that. Now this is the kicker, this is where it becomes sort of iffy. A loss of 1 EU per packet every 1.25 meters. So you use more than one of these, you're going to lose an EU. Now, is that really so bad? I don't know, when you think about it, I'll use this as a comparison. Okay. Let's say you're shoving the maximum amount and pretend it's 2048 EU per packet. Okay? Blam. 2048 EU per packet. Every time it runs through the system of wires, in this particular case, 4 times insulated HV cable. Basically I make it dawn. And basically what happens is you're going to lose 1 EU per packet, in this case 1 EU from 2048 every 1.25 meters. Is that really so bad? It sounds really, really bad, but think about it like this. If you had the same total amount of power and you were splitting it into packets, let's say I had 1,000,000 EU stored somewhere in a block, and when I transmit it out, I split that 1,000,000 EU into packets of 2048 EU, and I spew out all those packets until I've run out of EU here at the storage block. I'm losing 1 EU every 1.25 meters. If I did it another way, if I used gold cable, I would lose 1 EU every 2.5 meters. Now that sounds good, doesn't it? That sounds better. But think about it like this. If I spread them out into 128 EU packets instead of 2048 EU packets, then basically the storage block, which had 1,000,000 EU, it's basically generating, let's see, 128, let's see, times 4 is generating about 16 times more packets. And that means you are losing essentially 16 times the EU over an equivalent distance. So this is losing 1 EU every 2.5 meters. Don't worry, I'm getting to a point, guys. This is losing 1 EU every 1.25 meters. So let's just say, for argument's sake, okay, 2 EU every 2.5 meters, which sounds equivalent to this, and it still sounds bad. But when you think about it, if you use this cable, you're affecting 16 times the number of packets, which means you're damaging your power from this block 16 times more. So this is all of a sudden, if we're talking about equivalent terms to that, this is losing 16 EU every 2.5 meters. It doesn't really work out. It doesn't sound good, but that's basically the maths of it. And this is losing 2 EU every 1.25 meters. So what I'm trying to say is, over a really long distance, even though you're losing 1 EU every 1.25 meters, for the total amount of EU that you're transmitting through this particular wire, you are essentially losing only 1/8 of the equivalent amount that you would be losing through gold cable. That's what they mean about efficiency when they talk about that sort of thing at length in the Industrial Craft Wiki under cables. You'll see this table, and there'll be numbers in red and orange and green and so forth, and they'll be trying to recommend to you, okay, so if you're going to travel over this distance or that distance or that distance, you're probably best off to use this type of cable or that type of cable and blah blah blah, and they'll talk about efficiency. That's kind of where the numbers start to really come into play, and yeah, it's a little bit of a head spin, to be honest. It's a bit of a headache. I won't go into it any more than that. I'll just say there's a lot more than meets the eye when it comes to transmitting power over long distances. So a good rule of thumb is to simply not travel your cables, or yeah, don't make your EU have to travel over long distances. Generate it, store it, and use it all within like a compact space of within like about, I don't know, 20 or 30 meters worth, okay? Don't make your EU travel long distances, otherwise you're going to have to use this sort of maths and logical thinking to try and like just, I don't know, lose as little EU as possible. Now, I've got a little dugout here because that's not quite all the cables. Those are all of the normal cables. We've got 2 more cables in here. We've got this and we've got this. Now, we have essentially a setup here of, now I've got, let's see what you're seeing some redstone dust planted on the floor here, and I've done that on purpose. It's basically connecting these 2 bits of wire. I know they kind of look weird and beefy and so forth, but technically they are wires. They are 2 different types of wires. One is called an EU detector cable. It is made with 4 times insulated HV cable. There you go. I told you it would be used in a recipe. Always maximum insulate the wires that can be insulated. An electronic circuit, one of those cables, and 3 redstone gives you an EU detector cable. Detector cable. EU detector cable. I wonder what that will do. Basically, what it does is it detects whether or not EU is going through it. You put it sort of in your cables, sort of just as a cable, you know, and you knock out one length of cable and chuck it in there, and it will emit a redstone signal if EU is going through the cable. Why would you want that? Well, if you're automating things and so forth, you want to know when something is on. This is a really good, simple, easy way to actually detect the power that's being used, if it's being used at all. It detects any power. So basically, it could be packets of 1 EU, it could be packets of 512 EU. Any packet in that range, if there is one packet going through, it will turn on the redstone. And if it's not receiving power, it will not turn on the redstone. And basically it sends the redstone signal in, I think it's all directions or something like that, I don't know. But basically that's what that is. So let's see now. Ooh, nice lag. Oh, by the way, this is a little introduction. This is how you make an electronic circuit. Insulated copper cable, 2 redstone, and a refined iron. You can interchange a refined iron with aluminium. It doesn't make a difference. But, as I said before, this beautiful electrum stuff. Oh, look at that! I replaced the redstone with electrum, and now for this recipe I get 2. Whereas with redstone, I just get 1. Learn to love electrum ingots, guys. They're awesome. There you go. That's how you make that. That's about the only new-ish thing in that recipe. And that gives you an EU detector cable. Now what I've got here is a machine from Industrial Craft that uses only EU. It's called a macerator, and it can smash up certain things. Let's see, what have we got in here? Oh yeah, what I've got is, this cable is actually quite useless. Let's put my 64 cobble in there. At the moment, this is generator. Don't worry about anything about this or the macerator. I will get to those eventually in subsequent videos. Let's just say this thing, when I put coal in it, kind of like a furnace, it burns through the coal and it generates EU. It's making power. And look at that. Power is going through this cable to the macerator, and the macerator is on now. Look at that. It's got a red arrow thing. That means it's fully charged up, ready to go. It's doing things, and it's turning cobblestone into sand. Woohoo! Awesome. The main idea is to tell you that this cable is getting EU, and it's sending a redstone signal to this thing. Now look at that. Did you see that? It was on. Look at that. Give it a redstone signal and this thing changes. It turns on, it seems. I'll explain that in a second. This, let's see, the details about this very quickly. A loss of 1 EU per packet every 2 meters. So if you put this and another one next to it, you're going to have big losses. I think those sorts of losses through some tricky math sort of help add to the losses through other cables that it's connected to. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe you can confirm that, maybe not. I don't know. Personally, I never use these 2 cables, and I don't know anyone who actually does use these 2 cables as well either. I mean, I've never seen a YouTuber on Minecraft ever use these cables. Seriously, they are the most useless things, but they are there, so I may as well explain them. It can accept up to high voltage, less than or equal to 512 EU per packet transmission. That's the detector cable. Now this is called EU splitter cable. Kind of a misleading name because technically it doesn't split EU. In other words, okay, so I'm going to get EU input and then I'm going to split it into 2 or more outputs evenly. It doesn't work like that. A splitter cable would be more aptly named the EU switch or cable, or EU cutoff cable. Basically this thing, that's why I needed that cable. Let's see now. Got another generator. We're going to put stuff in him, and we're going to notice that this macerator is charging up, so everything's sort of going as normal. But if I give this thing a redstone signal, this macerator does not receive any power, and I can prove that by chucking this in there. Now if this macerator was continually supplied power, right now it's not. As you can see, this generator is actually filling up. It wouldn't be filling up so fast if the macerator was using up the power. But essentially over time, let's get a couple of overclockers. Don't worry, I'm just using this to speed this process up, and there we go. We've run out of power now. Hey, wait a second, what? Oh, I get it. Alright, whoops. My bad. I need to have both macerators in this silly little setup. Oh, okay, you can put redstone on top of a macerator. I didn't know that. Okay, let's put this in there. So this thing is using power. Okay, now he's using power. He's sending out a redstone signal. This guy here is receiving power and stopped the power from going. Basically, it's kind of like replacing the cable with a block or something, or air. It's saying, okay, I'm not going to let EU go through here, so EU isn't going through any of these cables. It's being stored in this generator, and it's not being used by the macerator or any other thing. Like, it's completely out of power. It's stopped. It's not doing its thing. That is how you make the EU splitter cable. Simple. It's a lever, 2 redstone, 4 times insulated HV cable times 2 on the sides. When it receives a redstone signal, it cuts off the power flow. Let's see, again, like the detector cable, the splitter cable loses 1 EU per packet every 2 meters. That's its loss, and it can handle high voltage transmission. There you go, guys. That's basically that. And if I knock this off, no more redstone signal. Oh, look at that, my macerator's back on. It's getting power, and this thing's losing a little bit of power. There you go, proof of concept. 2 cables that I personally never use. I've never seen other people use, but they are there, and you can use them if you want to help you automate certain things and so on and so forth. That is pretty much it for this video. I've prepared this sort of area, and there's also behind this wall another whole length of area to talk about the other components of this system. So I don't go past the mossy cobble wall for each video. That is it. I've covered cables. Next video I will be covering storing EU and transforming EU. If you take one thing away from this video, guys, I really hope it's the concept of voltage. Okay? Voltage is basically an explanation of how much power each packet has got inside it. EU, and by the way, EU is an acronym for energy unit. Very simple. It's kind of, it's set up to be so similar to electricity, it's not funny. So let's just call it power. Actually, let's not. Let's call it EU because that's what everyone calls it. Okay? Hope you picked up voltage. I hope that was a easy enough explanation to understand. Please comment, rate, subscribe. Let me know what you think. Let me know if there are any corrections and so forth. And I hope to see you in the next video where I discuss storage and transforming. And hopefully in the video afterwards where I will go on about generating EU, which will probably take a couple of videos because there's a lot of generators and there are a lot of rules and a lot of recipes to make all of these generators. Lots of different ways to do it, using lots of different fuels of sorts. And lastly, there will be finally a video just showcasing all of the machines that come with Industrial Craft and Greg Tech that use EU. And there's quite a lot of those too. I won't say any more than that, otherwise I'll start confusing you. So, hope you enjoyed the video. Have a good one, guys.